Hey, I'm Christian. I'm one of the volunteers in Harbor Kids, and I'm going to read you a story today. It's called God's Messenger. It is about Jonah and the whale. It's an absolutely classic story from the Bible, so pay attention. Don't get distracted. Get dialed in. All right, here goes. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your worst enemies that I love them. No, said Jonah. They're bad people doing bad things. Exactly, said God. They run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I'll give them a new start and I'll forgive them. No, said Jonah. They don't deserve it. I'll run away, Jonah thought to himself. Far away, so that God himself won't be able to find me. Then I won't have to do what God says. That's a good plan. Because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. Fun fact, guys, it was not a good plan. It was a silly plan, because you can't run away from God. He'll always come and find you. So Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. One ticket to not Nineveh, please, he said, and boarded a boat sailing in the very opposite direction. Well, it wasn't long before a fierce wind blew and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll, and everyone started turning green and got sick. Jonah sat bolt upright in his bed. You see, the first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God sent a giant storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. We're sinking, they screamed and started throwing everything overboard. Suitcases, food, whatever they could find, just chucking it. But now, at this point, Jonah knew that the storm was all his fault. Throw me in instead, he said to the sailors, and the storm will stop. The sailors weren't sure. It's the only way you can be saved, Jonah cried. And so 1, 2, 3, splash! No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm, the wind died down, and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over and he was surely going to drown, God sent a giant fish to rescue him. The fish swallowed him up with one gulp. Now it's quiet. He must have thought he had died. It's so dark in the belly of the fish, it's like a tomb. But then he smelled the rotting food and felt the slimy seaweed and knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of that giant fish. Sitting there in the dark for 3 whole days, Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon, he realized his plan was, well, very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running away, so he prayed to God from inside that great big fish and asked God to forgive him. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely onto a sandy beach, and then he heard someone calling his name. Go to Nineveh, God said, and this time, Jonah said, yes, sir. He went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's wonderful message. Even though you've run far from God, he can't stop loving you, Jonah told them. Run to him so he can forgive you. The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah and they started loving God. They learned how to do what God said and to stop running away from him like Jonah did. And many years later, this is important, listen up. Many years later, God was going to send another messenger with the same wonderful message. Like Jonah, he would spend 3 days in the dark. But this messenger would be God's own son. He'd be called the Word because he himself would be God's message to us. God's message, but translated into our language. Everything God wanted to say to us in the whole world was in this person, Jesus. There you go. Story of Jonah and the whale.